Welcome to this demonstration of the capabilities of Pemari's Single Sign-On product for CA PPM. The Pemari Single Sign-On product enables automatic logon to the CA PPM web application based on the user's Windows logon credentials, and doing so uses Kerberos or optionally NTLM v2 to provide this authentication. Prior to showing this authentication occurring, it's necessary just to first introduce the environment we're running in so that there's an understanding of what machines reside where. So in our environment we have a domain VM or Active Directory, within which we have a single Active Directory / domain controller and a workstation, Project 2007. Additionally, we have a Linux-based CA PPM server running. Being Linux-based, it's not part of the domain. So when we're using the workstation Project 2007, we will be accessing via the browser the Linux CA PPM Clarity system. When doing so, we will log on to the Project 2007 workstation as two different types of user. One is a local account, only resident on Project 2007 workstation, and another is the domain account or a domain account, which will enable us to prove the single sign-on is operational. Also in this demonstration we will be showing both the Kerberos and NTLM v2 authentication. So let us start and go to the workstation. So here I have a workstation running in a virtual machine, which is Project 2007. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as a domain user called Andy. So logging into domain VM as user Andy. I'm now able to start my browser session. And once I've started my browser session, I can then go to centos.vm.pemari.com to connect to Clarity or CA PPM. And as you can see, I was signed straight into CA PPM, not asked for a username or password. And if I do a help about, I'm able to see that I've been logged into CA PPM as user Andy, which matches my domain account name. Now, although we've mentioned this only works in the browser, if I do go to, say, for example, projects, and looking a particular project, I can now go into my either Workbench or Microsoft project and open the project with either of those tools from within the browser. Now, if I were to use Open Workbench or Microsoft Project directly, i.e. going into each of the tools from the Program menu, then I would still need to know what my username and password was, as the single sign-on cannot interoperate with these tools when accessed this way. Now, although I'm showing you this with Internet Explorer, the single sign-on does work with Chrome or Firefox as well. Now, what I've shown you so far uses Kerberos for the authentication behind the scenes or under the covers. If I now log out Clarity and also log out of my workstation, and log back in to the system as a local user on the machine. So in this case we're going to use user tester. And again, once I'm logged back in, if I now launch the browser, and if I navigate to the same URL, centos.vm.pemari.com, you'll now see I'm presented with a Windows security warning. Now, the reason for that is that Kerberos will not operate because the user I've logged in as is not in the domain. So in this instance, if I log in as Andy, which is the domain account, notice I said VM/Andy. Now if I log in using this account, this will now log me into Clarity, but instead of using Kerberos, that has now just used NTLM. And again, I can see at the top here, I'm logged in as Andy Litton. If I do an about, then the username is Andy. Again, that matches my domain, the domain account I provided in the NTLM dialog box. Now, if I log out, you can see on the logout, I'd get the normal logout messages. That's configurable within Clarity. Sometimes there are needs to be able to log in to Clarity using the administrator. Now, to support those situations, we've actually used a bypass URL. So, for example, if I specify a specific URL, so action equals security.login action, and then specify username equals admin, and then the password equals, I think it's C, login. That will actually log me into Clarity as admin, bypassing the single sign-on. Once single sign-on is enabled, the only way past it via the browser is using that special bypass URL. Now, version 15 of Clarity provides a new UI, and we do support that with the newer version of single sign-on. So if I now log out of the tester user, which was a local user, and log back into my machine as a domain account, so vm/Andy, and again launch the browser. And this time, if I access the new URL, so it is CentOS/PM, you can see that I'm now again logged straight into the new UI using the domain account of Andy, so I'm logged in as Andy. That's probably it. That's pretty much it in terms of the functionality of the tool. I've shown you logging into Clarity from a domain account, which will use Kerberos by default. Also shown you accessing the new UI. I've also shown you what would happen if you have NTLM enabled and you log in from a machine that isn't logged on or doesn't have a domain, isn't using a domain account. And I've also shown you that you can actually use Open Workbench still, except if you launch Open Workbench directly from the program menu items. Now, if you do that, you're presented with a username and logon. So there are certain things that you should set up, but you don't have to set up. We'd recommend, if you're using the single sign-on, that you actually have LDAP integration enabled to sync your users with CA PPM, because you can see that the username that you're using to log onto your workstation needs to match the username that is set up within Clarity. If that's not the case, then there is a mechanism for adding a mapping extension to the single sign-on to enable you to map between the domain account and the Clarity or CA PPM account. We'd also recommend that you have LDAP integration enabled so that people having to use Open Workbench, if they launch it from the program menu items, they'll be prompted for a username and password, then at least that password will match their domain account and it's more consistent in terms of use. Thank you for your time. And that concludes the demonstration of the Pemari Single Sign-On product for CA PPM.